Welcome to the Curtin University C.H.A.R.M Risk Assessment Module tutorial. This tutorial will give you an understanding of how to conduct an online risk assessment using the C.H.A.R.M WHS Risk module. To access C.H.A.R.M, staff are to log into the staff portal. From the staff portal homepage, go to the application wheel and click on the right arrow to move the applications. The C.H.A.R.M icon will be available at the end of the application list. Students can access C.H.A.R.M by logging into Student Oasis, clicking on the Campus Life and Guild tab, and then the C.H.A.R.M icon. Once you are logged into C.H.A.R.M, from the homepage dashboard, click on the WHS Risk Register icon. The entire University Risk Register will appear here, where you can view all submitted and approved risk assessments completed across the university. To create a new risk assessment, click on the New button located at the top of the menu bar. A new risk assessment page will appear. First, fill in the risk assessment name. For example, Woodworking 101 Sculpture Activity. Next, use the free text field to describe the task you are risk assessing. Your description should provide enough detail so that anyone who is involved in or reading the risk assessment understands the activity and the context of the risk assessment. This section should include information on the activities being undertaken, who is involved, where the task is being performed, and the frequency and duration of the task. Next, select the risk approver for this risk assessment. The risk approver is required to approve your risk assessment before it is submitted to the University Risk Register. Your manager or supervisor's name should automatically appear in the risk approver section. However, if the wrong person is displayed, or if you need to change the risk approver, click on the magnifying glass icon to search and select the correct person. Next, select the date of the risk assessment using the calendar icon. The risk owner is the person conducting the risk assessment. The risk owner will automatically assign to you. If you need to change the risk owner, click on the magnifying glass icon to search and select the correct person. In the Assessment Team field, fill in all the names of the people who are involved in the risk assessment activity. Next, in the Effect section, you are required to select the buildings and areas that your risk assessment will impact. To do this, click the Specific Locations button and choose the building locations and business unit or area impacted by the risk. You can select multiple buildings and business units. To select a building location, select whether the risk assessment is on campus or off campus. If on campus, click on the magnifying glass icon and use the first drop-down list to choose a campus. Next, use the second drop-down list to choose the specific building or buildings that the risk will impact. For example, if you are conducting an activity in Building 400, you will need to select Bentley Campus and then 400 Building. In the Business Unit section, click on the magnifying glass icon and use the drop-down lists to filter down to the school, department or area that will be impacted by the risk. For example, If you are conducting an activity for the School of Public Health, select Curtin University, Office of the Provost, Faculty of Health Sciences, and then the School of Public Health. In the Documents Referenced field, enter the names of any relevant documents that assisted in the preparation of the risk assessment. For example, you may wish to attach an operation manual for a piece of equipment you are using. Use the Attachment section to browse your computer and upload documentation to support your risk assessment. Once you have completed the risk assessment page, click the Next button located at the top of the screen to continue. This is the risk assessment screen. This is the main section where you will conduct a risk assessment of the activity you described on the previous page. In this section, you will work from left to right, completing steps 1 to 6 to identify, assess, and control the risks for each selected risk factor for your task or activity. To begin the risk assessment, select a risk factor category from the drop-down list. The risk factors are categories of risks identified by the university. For example, for the woodworking activity, the risk factor Plant and Equipment is selected from the drop-down list. Once you have selected a risk factor, a set of descriptors will be displayed below. Select the appropriate descriptors from the list by checking the boxes that apply to your risk. Next, using the checkboxes you have selected, enter the specific risk information into the free text field for the risk factor. This description should include detailed information on the likely consequences, such as types of injuries or illnesses that are likely to occur, how many people are exposed to the hazard, the likely severity of an injury, illness, or damage, and how long the person is exposed. For example, the woodworking activity consists of operating a band saw. Operation of the band saw may result in a medical incident from exposure to moving parts where the user's hands may come in contact with the moving blade. An injury may occur from entanglement of hair, clothing, or jewellery if they come in contact with the moving parts. To add a risk descriptor that is not on the list, click on the plus button located underneath the descriptors at the bottom right corner of the section. In step 2, you are required to describe the existing controls in place and assess the level of risk with these controls already being in place. To enter an existing control, you must first select the type of control using the drop-down list. This list contains the hierarchy of controls. The hierarchy of controls provides a priority order to determine the most effective risk controls. Controls that eliminate risk should always be considered first. If it is not possible to eliminate the risk, then the next highest order control should be considered. For more information about the hierarchy of controls, refer to the Information section on the left-hand side of the screen. Once you have selected the type of control from the drop-down list, use the free text field to describe the control in detail. For example, an existing control already in place on the band saw is the use of the guarding that prevents users from coming in contact with the moving blade. This is an engineering control, so engineering is selected from the hierarchy of control drop-down list. Where a risk has multiple controls in place, use the plus button to add more controls and descriptions for the risks identified in step 1. In step 3, you will need to assess the level of risk that currently exists by considering the controls you already have in place. To assess the current risk level, click on the Matrix button. Use the risk matrix to assess the level of risk by considering the current controls you have just listed. To do this, use the descriptors on the left-hand side to select the likelihood of an incident occurring given the current controls being in place. For example, the risk of entanglement of hair, clothing, or jewellery may occur. Therefore, possible is selected. Next, use the descriptors along the top to select the most likely consequence as a result of the risk, considering the current controls in place. For example, the risk of entanglement of hair, clothing, or jewellery may cause injury requiring medical treatment. Therefore, minor is selected. The level of risk will be determined by the combination of the likelihood of an incident occurring and the severity of the consequence resulting from the incident. Your current risk rating will appear in Step 3. For example, the possible and moderate selection results in a risk rating of medium. Next, in Step 4, you are required to enter any proposed controls you wish to put in place. Proposed controls are put in place to reduce the current risk rating that you determined in Step 3. Complete this section by selecting the type of control and describing the proposed control for each risk factor. For example, in order to reduce the risk of entanglement with the moving blade, the supervisor will write and enforce a guideline to ensure all people entering the workshop will have their hair tied back, loose clothing tucked away, and jewellery removed. If you have multiple types of controls, you can add new sections by clicking on the plus button. In Step 5, you will need to assign your proposed controls to a responsible person and select a due date to ensure the controls are completed in a timely manner. To assign a control, use the magnifying glass icon to search and select for the appropriate person. Next, click on the calendar icon to choose a due date for the control to be implemented. For example, Supervisor Test will be responsible for writing the workshop guideline. Continue to assign people and due dates for all proposed controls. In Step 6, you are required to assess the level of risk, taking into account the effectiveness of the proposed controls you have just listed. Reassessing the risk level will help you consider whether your proposed controls will be effective to reduce the likelihood or consequence of the risk. To assess the residual risk, click on the Matrix button and select a consequence and likelihood considering the proposed controls are implemented. For example, the likelihood of entanglement injury by the moving bandsaw parts with both the guarding and the new guideline in place may now be unlikely. If an injury occurs, it may still result in medical treatment, with a rating of minor producing an overall risk rating of low. As you can see through this process, the risk assessment helps you to identify controls to reduce the risk as low as reasonably practicable. Repeat this process through steps 1 to 6 to identify, assess, and control further risk factors. To add another risk factor, click on the plus button located on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. Follow the same process of selecting the risk factor, descriptors, and controls until all of your risks have been identified. Once you have completed this page, you can save your risk assessment as a draft by clicking on the Save button. If you wish to invite another person to peer review your risk assessment, you will need to save the risk assessment as a draft. The peer reviewer will not be able to see your risk assessment if you have pressed the Submit button to submit it for approval. If you are ready to submit your risk assessment for approval, click on the green Submit button. Once submitted, an email will be sent to the risk approver to approve the risk assessment. This is the end of the C.H.A.R.M Risk Assessment Module tutorial. For more information on how to navigate C.H.A.R.M or complete a risk assessment, visit the Risk Assessment webpage on the Health and Safety website. Thank you for watching.